Welcome to Season 5, Episode 4 of Solarpunk Presents.
On the podcast today, I'm joined by Kees Schuller, Lindsay Jane, and Charles Valsechi, organizers of a conference about Solarpunk named the Solarpunk Conference, of course.
Before Ariel dives in, I just want to say don't forget to support us on Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like all our videos. Now take it away, Ariel, Lindsay, Kees, and Charles.
Kees, Lindsay, and Charles, welcome. I'm really glad to have you here. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Lindsay Jane. I am a horticulturist and I am also a YouTuber. I have a YouTube channel called the Solarpunk Scene, and at the moment I'm also studying landscape design.
Hello everyone, my name is Kees Schuller. My pronouns are they, them. I am a PhD candidate at Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada, studying solarpunk. Mostly solarpunk literature, a little bit of solarpunk more broadly, as well as a bunch of other fun genre things. I really into monster theory right now. It's a very cool little, what does it mean to think about monsters culturally?
I'm Charles. Hello, everyone. So I'm a professor. I teach game design and illustration. Also, I'm a game developer. So I'm doing lots of different things, I guess. So that's me. I'm over here in Colorado, so that's fun. Oh, I also use he, they pronouns.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I want to ask you to introduce our listeners to the Solarpunk Conference. So what is it and why should they attend?
The Solarpunk Conference is an online conference that the three of us have gone and built together with a team of volunteers. We really wanted to be able to go and create a platform for cross-field solarpunk conversation and making sure that we're bringing all sorts of different expertise to everyone to create an environmentalist solution to be able to go and get this information across to people. We noticed that there wasn't necessarily something accessible like that out there and wanted to bring that to people. If you are interested in going and learning about all sorts of different subjects relating to solarpunk, then definitely come check us out and come check out the conference.
What kind of presentations are there or could we expect to see?
We've got a lot of different subjects that we ended up covering. Last year, our keynote speaker was Andrew Sage of the channel Andrewism, who ended up having kind of a general talk about creating a better future. We've ended up having talks on ecological education, hydroponics, urban planning, solarpunk literature, all sorts of different topics covered by different experts. And this year we're looking at going and building a couple of panels or talks on things like regenerative agriculture, AI and solarpunk media and literature.
There's a lot of different approaches, right? Like last year we saw some really cool ones about individual, like at the individual level, how you can make change. Some talks about how solarpunk is working can be, involved at the larger levels. I don't want to say that this is a good way to keep abreast of what conversations are happening in solarpunk, because that makes it sound a lot like bragging to me, and I don't want to do that. But also, this is a way to keep up to date on what some of the conversations happening in solarpunk, because, we're having people who have these ideas coming and sharing them and then talking to each other throughout the conference.
Just to expand maybe also on the maybe lesser known things, is we did have a space for people to hang out. We did a little music dance party thing at the end. So there's also a little bit of a lighter, sort of more playful parts as well that I think maybe are just not as well known, but definitely made it special and as intimate as it can be on an online platform.
I attended last year and I really enjoyed the dance party. I gotta say, the fun parts of Solarpunk, I think, it's just great to be in community with a lot of like-minded folk and just really let loose and be playful. I wanted to ask why you three decided to host a conference about solarpunk in the first place. And you answered that a little bit already, Lindsay Jane, but I wanted to make it sort of more broad question. So why Solarpunk? Why a conference?
Well, Lindsay and I started as mods in the big Facebook Solarpunk group that expanded to the Discord. And I think I myself was like became interested in Solarpunk as like a concept artist and artist in general. Like the visuals were really interesting to me, and then it became exceptionally exciting that it was also like aligned with my values. So that's kind of what brought me specifically to Solarpunk. But I think the conference sort of grew out of our all sort of like already having built a little bit of a community among being mods for both the Facebook and Discord groups. And then we saw this other conference-like thing that was advertising itself as being Solarpunk. And we wanted to be really excited about this possibility. But when we looked into it, we honestly felt like it didn't really align with our values or the values that we felt like were the Solarpunk values we were seeing in our communities. So I think that disappointment kind of started a conversation between a few of us. Claire, who's no longer with us, I mean, a part of our team, and Lindsay. So the three of us started bantering a little bit about like, well, like maybe this is something that we could do and we could do it in a different way than these other people were doing it and hopefully stay closer to what we would like to see out of a conference. I mean, I think that was one of the big motivators for us was like, what do we like? We wanted to be excited about this thing. What would make us excited about a conference? That's sort of like how the Solarpunk conference was birthed.
I think that makes a lot of sense, though, because Solarpunks come at the whole concept of Solarpunk is reflected very differently across, I guess, locations, and people who are involved in it often have different ways that they think that Solarpunk comes out. And so encouraging that and encouraging those values, I think, and bringing all these sort of heterogeneous groups together into something to sort of celebrate, like, yeah, we might be different, but we have these values in common is really important.
I think also there's just something really fun about being able to bring so many people from so many different expertises and points of view and understanding. And I think that's one of the fun parts also just being a part of the organization team. I think with Kees and with Lindsay and with everyone else is that we all have like a unique point of view and all come from a different place with Solarpunk in a way. So it's really fun getting to collaborate and getting to also like grow our perspectives.
Lindsay, Kees, did you want to speak to that a little bit?
I think Charles summed it up pretty well personally, but I just wanted to go and add that one of the best things about the conference was getting to kind of bring this community together and get Kees on board as one of our volunteers. This team has been a lot of fun to go and work with, to go and create this wonderful conference together.
Being a part of this group has been fantastic. I think as much as the first year was like, let's do this because there is a need, this year a lot of it's like, let's do this because that was really fun and we want to do this again, right? Like we want to do this for ourselves and for the people we met through this as much as we want to do this, like for the event itself. Not to make it a selfish thing, but like, you know, there's that motive as well of like, this was really cool, this was really fun, we had a great time doing this, let's keep it going.
Although I know that conference organization can be a really massive undertaking, and considering how many people attended, how many people did attend? Like, what was the turnout like last year?
It was really good. We had around 150 total attendees throughout the day. Based on the numbers that we weren't keeping super close track of it because we were busy, you know, making sure everything was running smoothly. But we had around between 60 and 100 synchronous attendees throughout the day, right? Throughout the day of, which was really great. That was an excellent turnout. We were really, really pleased with that. But part of what we wanted to do was make the conference accessible to people who couldn't attend the day of. And so we, you know, had a big emphasis on recording all of the conference presentations, all the talks, and then distributing those recordings after the fact for both all of our attendees who'd registered, but then also more broadly on our YouTube channel now, looking at those numbers, we don't have precise numbers for how many attendees watched those recordings before they were posted. But looking at the YouTube, we have 374 subscribers on that channel, and between the different videos, around 4,600 views. So we've had, as much as there was 150-ish people on the day of, we've had a much larger reach since then, which is just so exciting. We're doing this. We're reaching people. We're spreading, people are, hearing about Solarpunk because of the conference that we put together.
It really seems like the themes of the conference really resonate with people or resonated with people. The theme last year was Imagine, Act, Thrive. And so how did you decide on that for your theme for the very first inaugural Solarpunk conference? What was the thinking behind that?
It was honestly democracy. We ended up going and all kind of contributing ideas together of different themes and kind of what made sense, and then voted. And Imagine, Act, Thrive was just kind of what was the most popular overall because it, imagining what a better future would be, acting towards going and creating that, and then seeing the future thrive and our society and people thrive from what we were talking about.
Question for all of you now. So can you tell me briefly about something that you really enjoyed at the 2023 conference? So it could be a panel or a conversation that you had outside of a presentation or something else. So let's start with Kees.
I really enjoyed a lot of the conference. I think something that if I want to have to pick one thing that's difficult, so I'm going to pick two. I'm going to cheat and pick two. I really appreciated, we ran a climate grief workshop, or we invited people to run a climate grief workshop, the Good Grief Network. And that was really important for me, not so much the workshop itself, right? The workshop was excellent, but seeing the response to that. So many of our attendees after the fact said that was so incredible. Taking the time to say that grief is valid and is important. Grieving the environment and the sort of environmental destruction that we're facing is a normal thing. And taking time to, think about how to address that grief and ways to solve that, or not solve, but to live with those emotions was really helpful to a lot of people. And knowing that they're not alone in this, that this is a widespread thing, people said was really helpful. And so just seeing the reaction to that, knowing that this was something that really helped people was really impactful to me. I really, really appreciated that. But on a slightly lighter note, I really had just a great time watching and listening to the conversations between the presenters during and after, in between their talks, because, hearing these people say, yeah, I've been thinking about Solarpunk, but not in this way. I'm going to have to take what you said and then build it into my own thing. And the ways that these ideas are building on each other. That was part of why we wanted to do this conference, right? Was to put these different things, these different facets of Solarpunk, right? And you said this heterogeneous community in conversation. And so hearing that happening, hearing that work live was so cool and so exciting.
Charles, would you mind telling me a little bit?
I mentioned this before, but I think again the little dance party at the end when everything was completed and everyone had such a great time, and it was just a way to I don't know, vibe with people from wherever they were. There was something really special about that. And I think for me, it was also just, it felt a little unexpected. We had planned to have, of course, this musician, but it felt unexpected, how well it went and how connected it was. I think that there's even somebody who's kind of chronically online, having moments where there's this group thing that happens, you feel connected with other people, is just can sometimes feel a little bit less common. And so I felt like it was just the little music dance party was just more, I think, more successful than I had anticipated, and there was something really special about that. And then I'll also like piggyback on Kees and have a second one, and that's for me the urbanism and essentially the talk that was about how we can change our streets. I thought it was really, really powerful. Philip Crosby was an amazing speaker. We actually just recently released that one on our YouTube. I definitely recommend it. It was just really great, and I thought it was really. It's one of those things that I feel like we can begin to move in our communities now that can have like a really meaningful impact for everyone. Yeah, I would say that talk. So definitely, I mean, now they're free on YouTube, so check them out. Yeah, but yeah, those are the two for me.
Well, I was at that talk, but I will definitely be sort of re-listening to that talk over the coming little while because, yeah, you're right. It was very good. Lindsay?
Personally, for me, I have been the person doing all the video editing for YouTube, so I've been having the chance to go and rewatch everything from the conference, and I will agree. I absolutely loved Taking It to the Streets by Philip Crosby. So good. Honestly, I'm totally unbiased with it kind of being related to what I'm studying right now. Uh, but it is really, really recommend that one. And of course, Andrew's presentation, which was titled Imagine, Act, Thrive, he did such a good job. It was so good and really powerful in terms of motivating people. And like, I know throughout the day that people were kind of relating their talks back to that presentation because of how much it spoke to everyone and just the community overall and seeing our hard work come together. All of it was just so good.
The community aspect really, I felt, shone through at the conference. You guys did a really great job with that, I think. And I wanted to ask you to tell me what you're each looking forward to at the 2024 conference. Like, can you give us a sneak peek of, well, I mean, at this point, you haven't really had presentations like pitched to you yet, but maybe what are you hoping to see?
I'm definitely hoping for some talks on kind of ecological restoration or things relating to bringing nature into cities, because I feel like that's something that really drew myself and a lot of other people to Solarpunk.
I want to agree. I think that that was the sort of conversations about ecological restoration and greening spaces was, I think, the big thing that was missing from last year's. And I think that, hoping to have that this year would be excellent. Personally, I'm really looking forward to this year just because we've done this before. So, last year we didn't know if there would be an audience. Right, we hoped and assumed, but we didn't for sure. We'd never built or run a conference before, and so we had to build all this from the ground up as we went. And so this year we're so far ahead of the game, right? We have so much already done just because we did it last year, and we don't need to figure it out as we go. Having that groundwork done is the part that I'm looking forward to, is being able to, focus on the conference being better as opposed to just focusing on the conference existing.
So I'll add something that I think will be really special about this year, as we've all sort of like devised a structure for making the way that we like reimburse our speakers and the way that we deal with our budget slightly more transparent and more cooperative. The budget for this year will, as essentially we get more attendees and we sell more tickets, the way that we disperse the money will increase for everyone. And that was something that I think is really different for our conference compared to most conferences, because most conferences don't reimburse the speakers. Most of the time you're there on your dime or the dime of your university or things like that. And I think for us, it was kind of important that we pay people for their work and we can help support people's work, hopefully, even if it's just in a small way. So I think it's kind of, I don't know, this is something that I'm kind of excited about, because it's really neat to be able to say, like, the more attendees we get, the more money the conference brings in, the more that we can use that money to help support your research or your work on the ground or what have you. For me, that's something that I'm looking forward to. I think that's something that's special and something that I'm hoping that we can continue to grow for the conference and for the Solarpunk community.
I really appreciate that transparency fiscally, especially. I think a big part of community building that people don't talk about is the financial part, because there's this taboo around talking about money, which is breaking down a little bit more now, I think, especially when it comes to something like Solarpunk, which values things like anti-capitalism and, communalism and stuff like that. We sort of shy away from talking about money too much because it immediately brings those questions of class and economics and stuff like that into the conversation. I don't know. I feel like this conference is a little bit dismantling that taboo, just in a very small way with that transparency. So thank you guys so much for deciding to do that. And a question that I actually had when I was looking at your website, I noticed, well, you had a big announcement actually about it, that the theme of this year's conference is Rays of Resilience. I wanted to ask, how'd you come to that one?
And we ended up coming to that one pretty similarly to how we found Imagine Act Thrive, where we compiled it together. It's going and creating a talk about what we can do to continue to be hopeful, how we can continue to look towards a better future, because so much of the time, we're presented with this really gloomy outlook for the future, and we're presented with things being really dark. So if we're able to be like, hey, no, listen to what these people are saying, listen to what these experts are going and saying, this is how we can go and shine a light on the future and resist this gloominess and resist this darkness and continue fighting for a better future.
That's really inspiring. Looking around at climate reality and choosing to, be hopeful still and choosing to actually do something to make the world a better place. That's very Solarpunk, I think. Did anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I would just add that that's also one of the things that the conference brings for, I think, all three of us and many of the people who probably attended, was it's also like kind of a relief to see the projects and the work that other people are doing in this space. It gives me just personally a lot of hope that I'm not I think it's easy to feel like you're alone concerned about it, or there are some people out there maybe doing some stuff, but it feels really nice to see oh, this person is working on this and this person is working on this. Again, the work is just multidisciplinary. So we really get people who are working in architecture, who are planning to try to figure out how they can make it more sustainable and more equitable and things like that. And that it extends all the way into the arts, where people are wanting to tell more stories that are, again, reflect Solarpunk values. So yeah, I think that hopefulness hopefully comes through in the conference, and getting to see how many different people are working on different projects and have these same things in mind.
I wanted to ask you why you decided to have the conference itself to be all online and not some sort of hybrid mix or in person. What sort of was the thinking behind that? Because I know that this is a hotly contested issue in, academia at least, and any organizations that put on, yearly conferences or something like that. I mean, especially for organizations that are all about the environment because of the carbon footprint of, travel. The community feeling of conferences is hard to replicate online, and there's not much chance to chit chat with other conference goers, or so goes the argument. And so how does the Solarpunk conference I guess, why did you decide to do that? And maybe how are you hoping to sort of replicate that community feeling?
I'll start with this simple. Really, when we were first discussing the Solarpunk conference, we were still neck deep in COVID. At the time, there was not even a possibility really for having, I mean, some in-person things were happening, but I think that they were probably unsafe or questionable at best. So for us, yeah, COVID was a real concern. We really wanted to make sure that we weren't contributing to dangerous situations for people or the spread. So that was at the height of our minds at that point. But I think also just accessibility. We know that Solarpunk is not just a one location thing. I mean, even just within our team, we have people from across the globe. And not to mention even like spread out among the our own continent. We wanted to build it in a way that also reflected the Solarpunk community so that people who lived wherever they lived could have access to it. Of course, there are still time constraints, so we provided the videos afterwards for the people who couldn't make the whole thing or could only make chunks of it or were interrupted or anything like that. The big thing was accessibility and COVID, just making sure that people were safe and that we could make it as accessible to as many people as possible. We also can't forget that this was our first endeavor in doing this, so I think that making it online makes it more manageable for us. I can't imagine having to do this the first time ever, and doing it on ground. That sounds like a mighty endeavor. And this already kind of felt like a mighty endeavor on its own.
Charles, you mentioned accessibility, and a large part of that for us was also financial accessibility, right? We didn't want traveling to an in-person conference has huge costs associated, both in getting there and then staying there and then, getting home. That's not something that we wanted to ask people to pay for. It didn't feel Solarpunk. And we'd also would have had to, talking again about finances, we would have had to have, rather than, charging what we did for attendance and having, pay what we want, pay what you want, or pay what you can options, we would have had to have charged more if it was in person to, account for renting the physical space. Having it online for those accessibility reasons as well was really important to us. But yeah, I mean, the academic conversation, I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here because you've said the keyword that I'm like, sleeper agent activated. I'm allowed to talk about academic discourse. Woo! You're right. There's a lot of conversations about conferences in person versus conferences remote in academia right now. A lot of that is building on those same conversations of like the costs of in-person attendance, right, financially, and the costs on either individuals or universities, right? And the way that having in-person conferences often limits participants and presenters to certain ranks of privilege, certain positions, right? Where you can only speak at a conference if you can afford to travel there, and you can only afford to travel there if you are either already, a successful academic, or if you have, a background, wealth, or additional money, or if you're getting, if you're one of the few people getting bursaries and grants to do so. So that's a big part of it. But then there's, as you say, right, how do you replicate that conversation remotely? We tried to do that as I think Charles has mostly brought it up. Lindsay, I don't know if you did. I don't remember. My brain has been sort of all over the place, but we had a sort of multi-channel approach to the conference. We had the main conference event running through Zoom. That was where our speakers were presenting. That's where people were asking questions directly about the presentations. But we also had an ongoing Discord server that we sent invitations to all the attendees, to all the speakers, running alongside the main conference. We had some active voice calls there where people were attending the conference together, remotely, of course, but able to interact with each other and engage with each other as the conference was going. We had a lot of different conversations going on in that Discord. We had dedicated threads and chats based on region and based on interest and based on the individual talks as well. So there was a lot of communication there. There was a lot of after the fact communication between the presenters and the attendees sort of saying, hey, we ran out of time during the Q&A. We still want to answer your questions. Here's the answers. Please share the questions here. We'll answer them as best we can. And then people sharing resources. And that's where, I sort of mentioned the conversation between presenters about, oh, that's a really cool idea. That's changing how I'm thinking about things. A lot of that was happening in that Discord, right? Where they had that chance to interact with each other. So it's, of course, not going to be perfect. It's not a perfect one-to-one, but we feel that we did a better job with that than just a purely Zoom conference would. And we still see some activity in that Discord server today, right? There's still conversations going on there every now and then, people saying like, oh yeah, I've thought about this, I've thought about that, which is in some ways more generative than in-person conversations would be because those have an endpoint, whereas this doesn't.
It was really surprising to me how like long that Discord went on and people
Yeah,
continued to interact for months even, still like having conversations with presenters and things.
you're right, right? I was shocked too. I think we all were like, had no clue that it was going to see that much ongoing conversation. So the other thing the environmental cost as well, right? And that's sort of the other, I think, part of both the academic conversation and what we were thinking is that traveling to conferences in person does have this huge environmental cost. The carbon footprint carbon footprint is itself a bit of a term that's loaded and in conversation, but the carbon cost of flying there is huge, right? And there's a huge amount of assumptions that to do research and to be an academic means to travel. The financial reimbursement system at my university is called Kroon River, and the icon, the app icon for that is a little plane taking off. So it's so embedded, right, that to be reimbursed at my institution is to assume that you are traveling for work.
Mhm.
So I think that, having it remote and saying, no, we're not doing in person, we're not doing hybrid, just shuts that down and says, like, let's not have that massive carbon cost of travel. But there's also the carbon cost of streaming, right? And that's another sort of part of the conversation that I think that's part of what academia is starting to talk about now as well, is that, online conferences have their own carbon cost, right? And data centers and streaming services are really bad for the environment, including things like Zoom. So there is that was a concern for us, is that like there is this other carbon cost that we're now taking on by having it remote, and by having it distributed on YouTube and all that. But I think to a certain extent, if you're going to do a conference at all, you're going to have carbon costs. There's some models that are completely, don't have carbon costs, but then at that point you're looking at like a very local, very narrow conference, or a very local or very narrow conference, right? Or you're doing like a conference by mail, which didn't quite fit what we were wanting to do. There is also this cost to streaming and to doing it remote, which we are aware of and we are, not thrilled about, but data shows that it is a lower cost carbon cost than flying, than doing the conference, in person with the flight cost associated. And it also allows us to distribute it. There's not really a method or a model to distribute these recordings that doesn't have a carbon cost. We could maybe just host the recordings as downloadable files on our website and have a static site and, do all that to, minimize the energy cost there. But then at that point, people aren't going to be seeing it. They're not going to be coming across it, right? They're going to have to go looking for it. So there's
and you're also a very small team of volunteers. That would be a lot of work. I mean, like we're talking about, the carbon cost, but there's also the energy cost in terms of human energy and in terms of, like how much time do people have in a day? So, you shouldn't run yourself ragged over this.
I think I said, like, we could just host it on our website. And I'm pretty sure I saw both Charles and Lindsay just have like intrinsic fear responses of like, no, don't say it, Kees. Don't do it. Don't speak this into existence. Because I'm not technically savvy. I wouldn't have to be the one having to do that.
Lindsay, I haven't heard from you on this.
We have discussed the possibility of having something hybrid in the future, maybe somewhere down the line. But I think probably what would be coming first is just, making the conference into a 2-day event rather than just a 1-day event before making it in person.
That would be awesome for it to be a 2-day event. And yeah, I really like the accessibility of the online platform. I personally found it really, really helpful. And also really appreciated the, like the consciousness of not spreading COVID. That was great, especially since we seem to have decided that COVID is over as a society.
So on the topic of like you enjoying it, I wanted to like turn two things onto you and ask you like how did you enjoy presenting, because we all really enjoyed your presentation and the group that came through with that. So I wanted to ask how it was for you as a presenter, and then also if you had a personal speaker or presentation that you really enjoyed from last year.
I do know that my favorite speaker was Andrew Sage, of course. I really, really, really enjoyed his keynote. And yeah, because I felt like it spoke to everyone where they were at, I guess. Part of the reason that I enjoyed his keynote so much was because of the conversations that it generated and the way that people in the Discord kept talking about it and relating things back to it. So it wasn't just the talk itself, it was kind of the ripples that it had throughout the community of people who were attending the conference at the time. So that was, to me, really highly enjoyable. And I mean, his delivery was amazing as well. In terms of being a presenter, I really enjoyed it. I felt that you guys were very responsive, and I don't remember if there were technical difficulties. I don't think there were.
Behind the scenes.
Okay, well, you did a good job of keeping that under lock and key, or keeping a lid on that, because I didn't notice anything as a presenter. No, the platform was really good, actually. And I really enjoyed the fact that people could, write in their questions, or they could choose to unmute and ask their questions that way. As someone who does a lot of thinking, not necessarily very well out loud, I'm much better with sort of written things. I really enjoyed the opportunity, well, I guess not as a presenter, but as an attendee to ask my questions via text. But then as a presenter, I enjoyed the fact that, well, I mean, like, especially with written questions, it was nice to have them after the fact, when people had time to sort of think about it and then come back with questions about specific aspects.
Before we move on, I do want to mention something fun as well. As of recording at the moment, the Solarpunk reality panel is our most popular video on YouTube at over 2,000 views.
Oh, wow. I will take none of the credit for that. That goes to my co-presenters to
Just for context, that's the one that Ariel was a part of.
Yeah, that, I mean, I don't think it had anything to do with me. I think it is much more Joey and Luca and Andre as well. So, but yeah, that's great. I'm really glad that the YouTube channel exists to sort of reach people who may not have even really thought about Solarpunk, and to get them interested in this Solarpunk conference that will be coming up. And so who knows, maybe you'll have more not maybe, I think definitely you'll have more attendees this time around. So be prepared for that. Thank you all so much for joining me today to talk about the conference. I really loved reminiscing about last year's programming, and I'm certain that this year's is going to be such a hit. Talking to all my listeners out there, you're not going to want to miss this. So the conference itself will be later in June, but until then, so where can people go to find out more about it?
We do have all the social medias out there. Most of them are Solarpunk Conference, but yeah, our website is solarpunkconference.com. So you can find a bunch of information on there. I really recommend, if you want to stay up on what we're doing when we are releasing new stuff, when we announce speakers and things like that, to sign up to the newsletter. It's just the easiest and fastest way for us to go to directly, and hopefully keep you from spending your life on social media.
Also, all of the talks are being slowly released to YouTube. So if you want to catch the 2023 talks of what was presented, those are, of course, as we've mentioned, all available there for people.
Which Lindsay has been doing an absolutely fabulous job of assembling and editing for, all of those audio gremlins and blips are just mysteriously vanishing before it sees the light of day. We do have a date now for the conference. It is June 29th. We do have a sliding scale on tickets. So if you want to attend, but don't want to pay the full amount, or can't pay the full amount, there are options there. We'll be releasing the recordings from this year as well, eventually. So if you can't make it on the day of and you don't want to pay, but you're happy to wait and just check in eventually, still subscribe to the newsletter because that's the best way to find out about when those start going live.
Okay, awesome. And thank you for telling us about the date, because at the time I had assembled all of these questions, I don't think that the date was announced. And
We
so,
haven't announced it yet.
oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
We'll
By
have
the
announced
time
it
this
by
comes out, you will have it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have a personal little sneak peek into it, so that's exciting. Okay, well, you heard them, listeners. So June 29th, be there or be not Solarpunk. No, but you're not going to want to miss out on it. It's a great time. Thank you again, everyone, for joining me today to talk about this. I really enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, I'll see you around.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for listening to Solarpunk Presents, a podcast hosted and produced by Ariel, Kroon, and Christina de la Rocha.
The audio for this episode was recorded in part on the traditional territory of the neutral Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples.
And in Germany. The opening and closing music for this podcast is Water Cooler Gang by Monkey Warhol, available for use under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License.
Don't forget to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/solarpunkpresents.
Every little bit helps us keep bringing you discussions and interviews.
Until the next episode, keep dreaming.
And stay Solarpunk.